button. Hey everyone, welcome to the third episode of ICC Interesting Conversation Corner. Today we have on Morgan Coghill, the Democratic primary challenger to Brad Schneider in Illinois' 10th Congressional District. Hey Morgan, lovely to have you.
Thank you, Alexandria. No, it's great to be here. And, I'm looking really forward to talking about, what I'm standing for and why I'm here and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So, first question, for those in the audience outside of IL-10, can you highlight some of the geographic strengths of the district?
Geographic strengths, probably the biggest and most obvious ones, say, if you're looking at a satellite, is the lakefront. We have massive amounts of fresh water frontage on Lake Michigan, and that stretches from Cook County in the south almost into Chicago, all the way up to the Wisconsin border. As we go west, say north and west into our district, it gets more rural, until you're into full-on farmland in eastern McHenry County and western Lake. So you got a mix of close-in suburbs, exurbs, and then very rural communities. And then we have the county seat, which is Waukegan, which is fairly large. So that's another urban center for the in the Illinois 10th.
Yeah, absolutely. Second question. If your campaign were to have a theme song, what would it be?
I have thought about this, and I've several in the running. One would be "Head Like a Hole," Nine Inch Nails, "The Day the Nazi Died" by Chumbawamba, and the third one would probably be, I don't know, Four Horsemen by Metallica.
That's some
So
pretty rocking options. Quite literal.
yeah. It depends on my mood of the day, which one I think is gonna be the best one.
Uh, Question three. Why is vehement isolationism bad for American workers?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, isolationism, it can be argued, especially in the 90s. Did we go overboard too much too fast with globalization? That can be argued, and it's probably true. However, we as a country, your parents or grandparents are immigrants. Now my great grandparents and grandparents are immigrants. My wife's an immigrant. The whole thing that makes us as a country great is that's constantly being replenished with new blood, new ideas, and adding to what was already there and changing it a bit. And we cannot just like wall ourselves off from the rest of the world. And like it or not, we are a trading nation. We always have been, from the earliest colonial period to now. Even today, we are well, maybe not right this minute, but we're the second largest exporter of goods in the world behind China. People kind of forget that part.
Yeah.
I mean, we are an international powerhouse, and one of the reasons we have been so successful as a country, if you're looking at it from whether it's a political standpoint or an economic one, is that we've been willing and able to forge relationships worldwide and partnerships based off of things like rule of law. Foreign companies and people are pretty sure, or had been pretty sure, they can get a fair shake. They're going up against U.S. companies or U.S. people, pretty sure that they might lose, but it's not going to be stacked entirely against them. So just the radical isolationism we're seeing is just it's not good for us, especially because that's what we've been built on for
Mhm.
300 years.
Yeah, I remember growing up being raised and having even as a little kid when I was getting into progressive politics, having a sense of pride that the UN was hosted like in the US and stuff like that. And
Exactly.
we were the founders of that. And also it's sort of a redemption arc because, with our muck up with the League of Nations, making it and then not joining it, like this is a redemption opportunity. So fingers crossed we continue on that path.
And you can discuss, and one other piece of that is you can discuss the prevalence of of the US dollar as a global currency, but
Mm,
the fact that that it's a global reserve currency is a testament to the fact of how deep those relationships worldwide have been. And okay, might not want dollar dominance, you might want Bitcoin or Ethereum or the Chinese yuan, whatever. But you know, that's a project that's been built up over 90 years to create that.
absolutely. What has your most used non-mainstream news source been lately, and why should others check it out?
Non-mainstream. So we're talking like maybe
Basically,
podcasts on YouTube that
yeah, basically anything that you can't find on TV.
there's one I really like, and it's sort of for a progressive, it's kind of interesting. It's a podcast, this is other than yours, of course. Um, you know, called The Bulwark, and
Hmm.
it's these, how do you describe them? I guess
I
ex-Republicans,
was about to say anti-Trump conservatives.
but they're not even conservatives anymore. You can see over the past, so they're moving even further in our direction. These guys are liberals and progressives. Some of them are a bit further on the right on specifically economic issues, but of like their five commentators, I think three of them are gay. So how right wing can you be, actually, especially in this day and age? But it's an interesting take, and it gives you a slightly different perspective on, agree around a lot of the broad issues, but just certain tweaks and the ways that they look at things and how they can be implemented, which is the most interesting thing. The pragmatic approach to, okay, we've got these big ideas, and as you know, sometimes we progressives kind of fall apart on like the whole detail and doing the thing, and that's where they're really strong, and I'd recommend checking them out.
Yeah, absolutely. I recommend everybody, if you can find at least one news source that is both internally transparent, but also challenges your worldviews, that's a really healthy thing to have in your news cycle. I would encourage
Yeah.
everybody to throw at least one in there. Okay, this one's going to take a little bit of backstory. So I was watching
Okay.
YouTube stuff and I found this iFought commercial. I finally curated my algorithm to where I get a lot less bogus ads and typically more like animal rights stuff like that. And it was this beautiful like documentary about how the anti-seal hunt movement in Canada went to Europe, brought members of European Parliament to the seal hunt to see like, these little baby seals being clubbed up and stuff like that because they were at an impasse when it came to movements in Canada. the
Mm.
That brought up an interesting question from my perspective as someone who fights for animal rights, and this, I think, as someone running for Congress, would be relevant for you. If you elected into Congress, what would you do with as an American representative to fight for environmental rights, pardon me, internationally? Because say, unlike if, I don't know, the capital of Bhutan, like Thimphu, got like a 2% tax increase, that's not going to affect Americans. The environment does affect us all. So how would you fight for that in countries outside of the US as an American representative?
Well, I think a lot of it is we're going to have to use U.S. leverage to be, let's say you mentioned Bhutan. Let's say I don't know what they export here, but it's probably not a whole lot. But we have certain, in theory, minimum requirements when it comes to things like labor and working conditions. Poorly implemented, I will admit, but we can use that sort of leverage to say, okay, you want to sell your widget here. Here are some of the things you kind of have to do to make sure that you're compliant. And the biggest one is we're going to have to lead by example. You know, that if the US is doing it, that the right wing likes to talk about China and India and that they're building all these coal power plants. Yeah, but they're also building a zillion solar panels, you know, wind, high speed rail. It's it's one of those things where it's not one silver bullet, it's going to be all of the above. Um, Good example is like Toyota. They didn't go all in on EVs because they're like, yeah, I don't think the technology is quite there yet. But they did go hard into hybrids and that are now getting 70 miles to the gallon. And eventually they're going to get into more efficient EV batteries, and that sort of approach, along with I have solar panels on my house, and we just redid some insulation as well, and we produce enough electricity that we send it back to the grid on a daily basis. We fill up our battery. By the way, the batteries still suck on these systems. They're not great. At least the
Yeah,
one I've got.
progress, not perfection. Huh?
Exactly. But you know, the U.S. is going to have to lead by example on this. Otherwise, there's going to be zero motivation you know, to be able to push other people to do it. Brand America's hopefully still pretty powerful, and we need to leverage that brand for good and not for evil.
Absolutely. If there's one vote Schneider has made that you wish more constituents knew about, what would it be?
The biggest one, and it doesn't get as much press because it didn't pass. This was the stupidest vote he took, was House Resolution 9495 in December of last year, which would have given the Secretary of the Treasury the exclusive right to strip nonprofit status of terrorist groups. Now, the time frame is important. This is a month after Trump won and before he was inaugurated. He knew who he was giving this power to. And this was associated with the protests at Columbia and some of the pro-Palestinian protests in other places. So this was, I think it was one of 15 Democrats to sign it. Like I said, it didn't pass, but this was dumb. He should have known better, and more people need to know about it. What's going on right now when they're talking about Antifa and the Democratic Party being a terror. That was Brad Schneider voted for that,
Yeah,
which is, come on, guys.
absolutely. Yeah, I was pretty foolish. Uh,
And there's a silver and a bronze medal. The silver medal is voting to praise ICE,
mm,
which it was a non-binding resolution. It was a gotcha vote, and it's just like, well, don't take the gotcha, man. And then to lionize Charlie Kirk, you know. But those are three pretty big dumb ones, especially two of them that did not actually move any legislation forward. It was just word salad. Why put yourself out there like that? I I,
exactly.
I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, what's he getting in return for all this concessions? Not a whole lot.
No, not anything at all. It's just, it goes back to the judgment question.
Hmm.
It's you poll test things to a fairly well, on balance, this is a 51-49 issue. We'll go with the 51. But we're a D plus, I don't know, 22, 23 district. You can swing a bit further left. In fact, you should be swinging further left. I voted for Brad 5 times, and I'm not scared to admit that, but it's not 2010 anymore. It's 2025.
Hmm.
But bipartisanship is going to be at the end of a spear by making sure that you can punch back effectively, as opposed to glad handing and you know being nice.
Yeah, yeah. And I myself have voted for Schneider 4 times. So yeah, likewise.
Yeah,
Other than pushing to overturn Citizens United, what would be your first move to improve our democracy in elections if elected?
this is going to be kind of pie in the sky, but I think there's something to it. I think the first thing we should do is triple the size of the House of Representatives, because there's nothing magical about 435. It's just that it's a number they picked in the 20s, and it's stuck ever since then. So now, you know, when I'm elected, I'm going to be serving 750,000 people, which is a lot. I mean, and in reality, if you look at the district, it goes from the close-in suburbs to then the more exurbs, smaller towns and cities, and then farmland. So in reality, in terms, if you're just looking at pure economic interest, you have three very different groups of people who have different priorities as to what they're focused on. There are some unifying things, by Illinois standards, our district isn't that gerrymandered. It's like
Yeah.
a triangle, so it's not too bad. But by tripling the size of the House of Representatives, what do? You give you make it much more local. You give third parties and politicians who are outside of the mainstream of their parties a chance to get onto the ballot and a chance to win. And it dilutes the effect of big money because it's one thing going after 30 senators a cycle and call it, I don't know, 100 House seats. It's another thing if those numbers are 400 House seats and 100 senators. It's I don't know how we change the size of the Senate. That'd be a little bit tougher. And the other thing I would introduce is, well, two more things: ranked choice voting. Instant runoffs. That's great. It gives more voices. It brings more voices into the process who don't, so people don't think they're wasting their vote. They're like, okay, this is my first, this is my second. So um, it brings a wider range of people in. And the other option, which it could work in Illinois because we're not registered by party in Illinois, is jungle primaries. Jungle
Mhm.
primaries with a ranked choice voting. Everybody's on the same docket, and if nobody gets 50%, well, if you did ranked choice, then you know, then well, you probably what you would do is say the top three or top four make it to the general. In each district in each state it'd be different, but these are easy things that
Mhm.
can be made to improve ballot access and improve democracy. And say, hey, I'm running this campaign, and I'm realizing just how to even to run it like bare bones, how much it costs in terms of time and effort and people, and it's not easy. And
Mhm.
it should be easier for people who want to get involved.
Absolutely. I wish actually more government classes talked about the increase in the size of representatives. That's definitely a big need. I encourage everybody that watches this video when it's uploaded to look up. Don't remember the exact video, but there's a video by Mr. Beat, not Mr. Beast, Mr. Beat, a former history teacher. It's exactly about this, and he makes the same exact argument for the need to increase the House. And I have to say, along with like advocating for at least some sort of term limits, we call it like 12 years. So it's two
Mm-hmm.
cycles of the Senate. And so that's smooth to equal out with the House and stuff like that. I don't, if you're an honest representative who genuinely cares for your people, wouldn't you want this? Don't you understand that you can't personally
Yeah.
relate to 700,000 people? If you want to like genuinely help human beings, wouldn't you want to make that a more plausible goal for yourself? Like,
Yeah, it would be. I mean, like I said, our district, and I've been driving around it, is fairly compact compared to some
mm-hmm.
of them. So it's, from where I am in Mundelein, it's, 45 minutes one way, 45 minutes the other. So that's not too bad. But some of these districts, the geography is huge.
Oh yeah,
And
last time I had on Dylan Blaha, who's running in District
yeah,
13. So
his is the worst. This is absolutely the worst. And the other thing, just if you think about it, all right, the House was seated in January 2nd of 2025. And then already by August, you're collecting signatures for the next round. I mean, and I don't have a good, do you want to make representatives terms 3 years? Is that something to do? Because in reality, I launched my campaign May 15th. They were in they were in session like 4 months, and we're already working up to the next election, which is like you're in permanent campaign mode. When are these people supposed to legislate? which yeah, I don't have a good answer to that. The representatives, the House needs to be more responsive to the people. And so I'm not sure what the right answer is there. But but I think having more House seats and more people involved and having to build bolder and wider coalitions to move things, I think that's only a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, speaking of pie in the sky dreams, I remember when I was going into like political science class thinking, oh, I wish representatives could have 3 years and Senate could have five. I'm like, both just feel just a year off in both directions. That'd be a slight.
Yeah, I think that would, yeah, I think 3 years, it gives you a little bit more cushion to actually do like legislating. And if you're offsetting the congressional um, the congressional votes from the presidential year, you have more engagement, year round or
Mhm.
each year. I mean, here in 2025, all right, we had a couple of governor's races. We had the Prop 50, which was awesome. I wish we'd do something like that in Illinois now. Um, but at the same time, it's just, all right, you get sworn in and then it's all of a sudden back on the phones fundraising and campaigning again. And that's not really the way it was meant to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And backtracking on two more points that you had answered before, I to bolster your arguments, ranked choice voting, as we just saw in New York City, can do the
Right.
Democrats great harm or great good. Like they literally
Yeah.
just got a majority. They could have combined the independent and Republican vote, still would have gone to the Dems. So that's like that could be a successful method for them. And then the jumbled primary, I have heard Butch mention multiple times as he's making the case to people that like given how left California is, it could be him and a Democrat. Like there might not even be a Republican in the final two, given how
Yeah.
left leaning that state is. And so those are both things that like would be advantageous for the party to take on.
No, and I think, and it just, you get more voices, you build the tent bigger by doing
Mm,
that. Because let's be, when I decided to get in, my politics are running, they're getting leftier the older I get, funnily enough. But I was looking at the district and I thought, the room here, the way I can, it was the reason I was thought I could get in and I think that I could win is because my views are commensurate with where the district itself actually is. If I was a mega conservative Republican, which I'm not, um, there's no path to victory here. You know, but for someone who is progressive, I think there is.
absolutely. What have been your favorite and least favorite parts of campaigning thus far?
My favorite parts have been actually, meeting people at protests, just out on the street. One really cool thing that happened to me was on Labor Day. I was rolling up to the No Billionaires protest. I was in my car and somebody was standing on the curb with my walk sheet and said, "That's him." And that was pretty cool feeling. Um, you know, so that was pretty neat. Um, in terms of least favorite, and it's fundraising, and I'm not taking corporate money. I'm not taking APAC money. I've been endorsed by Citizens Against APAC Corruption, so that I've made the lift a lot heavier than it needs to be. But we're not going to outraise Brad. We don't have to. We don't even need to come close. We just need enough to sort of like keep the website up, pay the people who are doing the scut work behind the scenes, and we're dependent on volunteers as well. And for me, that's really weird because I own a small business. I expect to pay people to
Mm,
work. And I'm just like, oh man, I can't pay you. I don't have the money. They're like, no, we're volunteering to do this, and volunteers are the lifeblood of any campaign. So yeah, fundraising sucks. I think we can all agree with that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's gosh, especially then like all green candidates literally can't accept super PAC donations even if they wanted. What race
Yeah, exactly.
What race in Illinois do you have your eyes on the most, besides obviously the Illinois 10th race?
The 13th, where our boy Dylan is, I think, he's been, you know, his rise has been like this.
Mm,
It's been, he's gotten a lot more notoriety, gotten a lot more coverage. I think he has a real shot to win. And of course, the complete jumble, which is the ninth district, is utterly fascinating. There are three or four very good candidates, a bunch of weird ones, and a couple of terrible ones.
mhm.
So those are the two that I'm really keeping my eye on.
Literally the exact same answer for myself, 100%. Uh,
And I do want to add one more to that. I think, when I handed in my petitions, Joey Rusevich from the sixth district was
yes,
there, and
yes.
he's gotten in pretty late, but he has a good team. They had a great launch. You know, they're he collected he collected a zillion signatures, like 3,500 in like 6 weeks. I mean, they are going all out, and good for them.
100%. And last question, as a former gaming industry person, I like to ask all my guests this. Favorite video game of all time and or at the moment?
At the moment, which I haven't played in a while, I like iRacing.
Mm.
I really like, you know, I really like racing and racing games. But as a kid, my favorite was Top Gun Second Mission on NES. Um,
Ah, classic system, yeah.
well, we didn't even have a Super Nintendo or anything really past that because I went to school. But yeah, so it's rocking it old school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, I tried telling my friends my favorite game is Daggerfall, and then I have to explain to them it was made before I was born. Only by a year, but still,
But still, it's if it's made before you were born,
it
that
counts.
it does. It
Well, thank you
does.
so much. This was awesome, and good luck.
No, thank you, Alexander, and you have a good one.
Take care.